It was New Year's Eve, and I was 22, working my first overnight shift at a small hotel downtown. Normally, these nights were quiet. Most of the guests were out celebrating, and the lobby stayed empty for hours. I had walked these halls hundreds of times before, checking rooms, restocking supplies, and making sure the lights in the corridors worked. Everything was routine, exactly the way I liked it. That night felt normal at first. I was tired but focused, my clipboard in hand, making sure everything ran smoothly. The front desk was quiet, the TV in the corner softly playing a New Year's countdown, and the occasional car honk from the street outside punctuated the silence. The hotel smelled like the usual mixture of cleaning supplies and coffee. Nothing seemed out of place. Then I noticed something strange. A door at the end of the hall, one I had walked past dozens of times, was slightly ajar. It was the maintenance closet. It should have been locked. I paused for a moment, thinking maybe a coworker had left it open. But I was sure I had locked it earlier. A small shiver ran down my spine. I brushed it off. Maybe I had just misremembered. As I walked closer, I noticed something else. Faint scuff marks on the floor leading away from the closet. They were subtle, almost as if someone had shuffled their feet while walking. My mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just the cleaning staff, or a guest who wandered by. But the marks weren't random. They looked deliberate, leading down the hallway in the direction of the rooms. My stomach tightened, a quiet unease settling in. I glanced around the empty hall. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights above was the only sound. No guests, no staff, nothing that could explain the door or the marks. And yet, I had the sudden, unshakable feeling that I wasn't alone. Just for a second, I thought I saw a shadow move across the wall at the end of the corridor. It wasn't clear, just a flicker, but it made me stop dead in my tracks. I told myself it was nothing. Shadows shift all the time. My tired eyes were playing tricks. I leaned on the desk and tried to focus on routine tasks, checking in imaginary guests in my mind to calm down. Still, the uneasy feeling lingered, like someone was watching from the darkness just out of sight. By the time I finished my first round of checks, the hotel was completely silent again. But the door remained ajar, and the shadow, whatever it had been, seemed to echo in my mind. It was a small detail, easy to dismiss, but something about it didn't feel right. I had a gnawing suspicion that this night wasn't going to be like any other. And that was when I realized the hotel wasn't empty. Someone or something was moving around in ways that no guest or staff should have been able to. After noticing the slightly ajar door in the hallway, I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling. The hotel itself was nothing special, an older building with worn carpets and fluorescent lighting that flickered occasionally. The lobby had a small front desk, a couple of chairs, and a vending machine in the corner. There was a faint smell of cleaning supplies, mixed with leftover coffee from earlier in the day. The walls were beige, unremarkable, and the whole place had that quiet, almost forgotten feeling that some smaller downtown hotels have, especially on nights when most guests are out celebrating. It was just past midnight on New Year's Eve. Outside, fireworks popped occasionally in the distance, muffled through the walls of the building. The city streets were nearly empty. Normally, the hotel would be full of last-minute travelers, families rushing to make their flights, or guests returning from parties. But tonight it was quiet. Too quiet. That alone made the place feel slightly off, like the silence was holding something just beneath the surface. I was working the overnight shift because I had picked up extra hours to save money for rent. Normally, I enjoyed these late shifts. They were predictable, calm, and gave me a chance to focus without distractions. Tonight, I was alone in the lobby for the first couple of hours, checking in a few late arrivals and then doing my rounds down the hallways. My manager had left me in charge for the night, trusting me to handle anything that came up. I was confident in my routine, checking room doors, monitoring the security cameras, making sure the lights and alarms were functioning. Nothing complicated. A few guests trickled in earlier in the evening, but by now, they were all asleep in their rooms. The only other person I might have interacted with was the night janitor, who had finished his rounds about an hour ago. He waved as he left, muttering something about enjoying the quiet. Other than him, there was no one else in sight. My coworkers had either gone home for the holiday or were attending parties. This meant that if anything went wrong, it would be entirely up to me to handle it. I made my way down the hallway to check the rooms. The fluorescent lights above flickered intermittently, casting long, soft shadows on the beige walls. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant mixed with old carpet. I passed each closed door, hearing only the muffled sounds of TVs or the occasional cough from someone trying to stay awake. The hall was narrow, quiet, and monotonous, perfectly normal. Still, as I walked, I couldn't shake a vague unease. That open maintenance closet door from earlier stayed in the corner of my vision, just out of reach. Everything about the hotel screamed normal. I was tired, doing a job I had done countless times. And yet, the quiet, the shadows, and the empty hallways made me aware that something could be lurking in ways I couldn't yet see. I leaned on the desk in the lobby for a moment, adjusting my flashlight and checking the security monitors. The hotel was just a regular building, my shift was just another night, and everything seemed perfectly ordinary. But deep down, I already had a feeling that ordinary was about to change. After finishing my initial rounds, I headed back to the lobby. The hotel was quiet, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I tried to focus on routine tasks, straightening brochures, checking that the vending machine was working, but the unease didn't go away. It was subtle at first, just a faint itch at the back of my mind, the kind of thing you notice when you're completely alone in a space. I decided to walk down the hallways again, checking doors and listening for any unusual noises. That's when I heard it, a soft creak above me. At first, I thought it was just the building settling. Old hotels do that all the time. But then another creak followed, a little closer, coming from the ceiling above one of the rooms. My steps slowed instinctively. I looked up at the ceiling tiles. Nothing seemed out of place. Yet the sound repeated, irregular but deliberate, like someone was shifting their weight while standing still. I told myself it was probably nothing. Guests might be moving around in their rooms, or maybe maintenance had left something running. Still, the hairs on my arms stood on end. I noticed the air felt colder down this hallway, and the faint fluorescent hum seemed to buzz louder than usual. I stopped at the corner and listened. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, a soft scraping noise echoed from the maintenance closet I had noticed earlier. I paused. That door had been closed when I first checked, but now it seemed slightly ajar again. I thought maybe it had swung open on its own, or perhaps the janitor had forgotten to lock it. I took a cautious step closer. The air smelled faintly of dust and cleaning supplies, but there was also something else, metallic, sharp. My stomach tightened. Then I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. A shadow flickered across the wall at the end of the hall. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to make me freeze. I leaned against the wall, my heart rate picking up slowly. The hall remained empty, yet the feeling of someone, or something, watching me was unmistakable. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was overthinking things. But the noises continued. Footsteps, soft and deliberate, echoed down the hallway behind me, then stopped. I spun around. No one was there. I listened again. The lights flickered above, and for a second, I thought I saw a figure standing at the far end of the hall. When I blinked, it was gone. By now, the tension had built into a quiet pressure, a sense that something was moving just out of sight. Every routine noise, the humming of the lights, the creak of the floor, the distant city fireworks, suddenly felt amplified, as if the hotel itself was alert and watching. I was still calm on the surface, but inside, my instincts screamed that this night was not going to remain ordinary. I took a deep breath and told myself to keep walking, to check the rest of the hall, and finish my shift. But as I did, I couldn't shake the certainty that something was lurking nearby, waiting, and that I might not be alone for much longer. I tried to keep calm, telling myself it was just my imagination. But the noises in the hotel were becoming harder to ignore. The soft creaks and scuffs had turned into heavier, more deliberate steps somewhere down the hall. They weren't random. They followed a pattern, coming closer each time I paused to listen. I felt my chest tighten. My shift had always been quiet, routine, and predictable, but tonight, that normalcy was gone. I checked the maintenance closet again. The door was now fully open, swinging slightly as if it had been nudged. My stomach sank. I had walked past this hall dozens of times before, and I knew exactly how the air should feel, the silence should sound. Something about tonight felt wrong. I noticed the flickering fluorescent lights cast strange shadows, and every time I turned a corner, it felt like someone had moved just out of view. The feeling of being watched became impossible to ignore. I could hear subtle breathing from the far end of the hallway. It was slow and deliberate. Whoever or whatever was there knew I was moving. My heart rate increased as I realized I was not alone, and this wasn't a simple coincidence. I tried to convince myself to call the front desk security phone, but when I reached into my pocket, my phone vibrated in a way that made my hand jump. The footsteps stopped. Silence. My eyes darted down the corridor. At the end, a shadow lingered. Not fleeting like before. It stood still, just beyond the reach of the light, and I could feel its gaze even from across the hall. I started to walk back toward the lobby, trying to keep my movements calm. Every step I took seemed amplified, echoing off the narrow walls. The closer I got to the front desk, the more I felt that someone was tracking me, adjusting to my pace. The hallway felt smaller now, like I was trapped in a space that was familiar, but suddenly threatening. The shadow moved again, a deliberate step forward, closer to where I had just been standing. My body tensed. I realized that whoever it was had been moving silently, waiting for the right moment to make their presence known. I could no longer tell if they were watching me from around corners or from the open rooms. The sense of being trapped intensified, and the calm, routine night I had expected vanished entirely. By this point, the hotel no longer felt safe. The familiar corridors, the hum of the lights, even the distant city sounds, all of it became distorted in my mind. The small, subtle hints of danger I had felt earlier had now become undeniable. Someone was in the hotel with me, someone who had been moving silently, hiding, and now closing in. I leaned against the wall for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. I had to decide what to do next. There was no one else here to help me. Every instinct in my body screamed that I was in danger. And as I glanced toward the maintenance closet again, I realized that whatever was lurking in the shadows was no longer content to stay hidden. I decided to head back to the lobby. Staying in the hallway felt like a mistake. I walked slowly at first, listening carefully. My shoes made soft sounds against the carpet, and each step felt louder than it should have. Halfway down the hall, I heard movement behind me. Not a creak, not a building noise. Footsteps. Slow and controlled. I stopped. The footsteps stopped too. My heart began to pound, but I didn't turn around right away. I waited, hoping the sound would start again, so I could convince myself it was something else. Instead, I heard a quiet exhale. Someone was breathing. It was close enough that I could tell it wasn't coming from a room. It was right there in the hallway with me. I turned around. A man stood near the maintenance closet. He was partially hidden by the shadow, wearing dark clothes and a hood pulled low over his face. I couldn't see his eyes clearly, but I knew he was looking directly at me.
He didn't speak.
He didn't move. He just stood there, blocking the path I had come from. I felt trapped. The lobby was behind him. The fire exit was further down the hall, past him. I took a step back. He took one forward. That was when panic finally set in. I ran. I sprinted toward the nearest guest room area, my keys shaking in my hand as I tried to unlock a staff-only storage room. My hand slipped. I could hear him behind me now. His footsteps were faster, heavier. He wasn't running, but he was gaining ground. I managed to get the door open and slammed it shut behind me. I locked it and backed into the corner, holding my breath. The room was dark, filled with cleaning carts and boxes. I heard the handle jiggle once, then twice. He started pounding on the door. Not wildly, just firm, controlled hits. Each one made the thin door shake. I covered my mouth to keep from making noise and called 911 with trembling fingers. I whispered my location, struggling to stay calm as the pounding continued. After what felt like forever, the pounding stopped. Silence returned, heavier than before. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stayed frozen on the floor, listening for any sound at all. Then I heard distant sirens. I stayed hidden until police voices echoed down the hallway. When they opened the door, my legs were numb, and I could barely stand. I pointed down the hall, unable to speak. The officers moved quickly, weapons drawn, sweeping the hotel. I sat on the floor, shaking, realizing how close I had come to being cornered in that hallway with nowhere to run. After the police cleared the hallway, one of the officers asked me to sit at the front desk while they searched the rest of the building. My hands were still shaking, and my mouth felt dry. I kept replaying the moment I saw the man standing in the shadows, blocking my path. I assumed they would escort him out in handcuffs any second. But minutes passed. Then more. Eventually, an officer returned and asked me to walk with him. He didn't say much. His tone was calm, but his expression was serious. We went down a different hallway, one I rarely used, toward the back of the hotel near the laundry and storage areas. That's when I realized something was wrong. They hadn't found him in the guest rooms. Instead, they showed me a narrow access door behind the laundry area. It led to a crawl space above the ceiling. Inside, the officers found personal items. A backpack, bottled water, old food, wrappers. A phone charger plugged into an outlet that wasn't supposed to be active. Whoever the man was, he hadn't just wandered in that night. He had been living there. One officer told me they believed he'd been hiding inside the hotel for at least a week. Maybe longer. He knew the layout. He knew which cameras didn't work properly. He knew when staff changed shifts. Then came the detail that made my stomach drop. They found a folded piece of paper tucked inside the backpack. It had my name on it. My work schedule was written underneath. Someone had taken the time to watch me, to learn my routine, to wait until I was alone on a night like New Year's Eve. The officers said they believed the man had been following staff members, not guests. He wasn't looking for a room to sleep in. He was looking for an opportunity. They never found him. The police concluded that he escaped through the same crawlspace system once he realized officers were on the way. There were too many access points, too many blind spots. He vanished before anyone could stop him. I sat there, staring at the paper, realizing that the strange noises, the open door, the breathing in the hallway, it had all been intentional. He wasn't hiding from me. He was testing how close he could get without being caught. What terrified me the most was understanding that when I ran, I didn't interrupt his plan. I forced him to move sooner than he wanted. The officer told me I was lucky. If I hadn't trusted my instincts, if I had stayed in the hallway just a little longer, things could have ended very differently. As they escorted me out of the building that night, fireworks were still going off in the distance. People were celebrating a new year, unaware of how close I had come to not seeing it at all. And the worst part was knowing this wasn't random. I wasn't just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He chose that night. And he chose me. I didn't finish my shift that night. Another employee came in to cover the desk, and I went home just before dawn. The streets were still littered with confetti and empty bottles from the celebrations. People were laughing, hugging, talking about resolutions. I sat in my car for a long time before driving, trying to slow my breathing. Everything around me looked normal again, but I didn't feel normal at all. For days afterward, I replayed the night in my head. The open door, the breathing, the way he stood in the hallway without saying a word. The police told me they would follow up if they found anything else, but I never got another call. Weeks passed, then months. The case quietly faded away. I went back to work eventually, but I never worked nights again. Even during the day, the hotel felt different. I noticed every shadow. Every unfamiliar sound made my shoulders tense. When I walked past the maintenance closet, I couldn't help but glance inside, half expecting to see someone standing there again. What bothered me most was how prepared he had been. The crawl space, the supplies, my name written on that paper. That meant he had been watching long before I noticed anything wrong. It made me wonder how many times I had walked those halls while he was right above me, listening, waiting. Sometimes, late at night, I still wake up thinking I hear footsteps outside my door. I'll lie there in the dark, listening carefully, telling myself it's just the house settling or a car passing by. But that same feeling comes back, the sense that someone is nearby, just out of sight. The police never caught him. There were no arrests.
No updates. No explanation.
He disappeared as quietly as he had arrived. And that's what scares me the most. He knew how to stay hidden. He knew how to leave without being seen. And he knew exactly when I would be alone. Every New Year's Eve, when the world gets loud and people let their guard down, I think about that night. I wonder where he went. I wonder who he watched next. I still don't know his name. I don't know if he was ever caught. And sometimes, when I'm walking through quiet hallways or empty buildings, I can't help but think the same thing. What if he didn't disappear at all? What if he just moved on and learned someone else's routine instead?